NomadCoolRV, refrigeration reimagined.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the ground problem, the common known problem with all motorhomes. The way they're set up is that the earth, the ground, is bonded to the chassis, right? So the first thing you notice with this is the car battery goes out and people change the car battery. It doesn't change the problem, but it seems to help, right? So that's the first thing. So if you've changed one car battery out already, it's possible that you might have a different problem that you haven't realized already, which is the earth bonding problem, the ground problem. And this problem is like a switch. It's intermittent, right? So it doesn't go like a resistance thing where it's low or whatever else. It's on or off, and it goes with movement of the van. So you might have it working like on, off without realizing, right? Of course, you know, and the power of the battery is being sort of sometimes charged and sometimes not charged. And of course, over time, it gets longer and longer. The outage gets longer and longer. This problem is serious, right? If you've got a problem like that, you've changed already the battery, it hasn't really solved the problem. You may have even gone to the point of changing the alternator and it still hasn't changed the problem. And you're driving along one day and your brakes are starting to not work, your lights are starting to flicker, and then you find your steering doesn't work, right? That is serious, right? That is a problem which hasn't really, as far as we know, caused any major accidents yet. There hasn't been a recall over it or anything like that, but this is a serious kind of problem in the background. Now, look around on the forums, you'll see people talking about the ground problem, the bad ground on motorhomes and all vans really. And the solution, of course, is to fix that. Now, typically, without a fridge on, you are not going to have that problem with the driving. What's happening is a bad combination between that and the fridge. So we really need to bring that into the conversation. When you've got a fridge, a DC fridge, they're called three-way fridges. They work on gas, they work on DC, and they work on the AC. Now, you're driving along in the European Union and America as well. They say that you're not allowed to drive with the gas in petrol stations, and you're not allowed to drive in tunnels and stuff like that. So you're not allowed to have gas on while you're driving. That's the story. And so a lot of people, what they do is they drive with the third option, which is the DC only. And what they do, quickly, I'll explain how it works. They have about 12 amps coming out of these into the element. The element's like a kettle element in the back of the fridge, and that element isn't enough to bring the fridge to cold. It's just enough to keep it, you know, just there's an AC element as well, which is working on a lot more ampage, and that one actually makes it cold. That's the proper, you know, ampage for making the fridge really cold. However, for the DC, you're driving along, you've got 12 amps coming out your battery, your alternator is on off with the bad earth problem, and all of a sudden it just drains too much. You're on an hour into the drive, and your power steering goes, your lights go out, and your brake assist doesn't work, and you're doing 100 kilometers an hour. It's a bad combination. Let's not imagine what the worst case scenario could be, but it's just not good. Now, these fridges don't have anything inside them to stop this happening. There's no low voltage, no low current detection inside there, and of course that would have been a good idea. If you've got a control board like this, what you really want to have, right, is a low voltage detector inside there. This one's burnt out. That's a different problem from what we're talking about now. However, and that's a very common problem as well, but we'll get back to that. So this problem with the low voltage detection being missing from these guys could really end up in a nasty problem. You're driving along, your fridge is on the DC mode. You end up with corrosion in your car. All cars have got corrosion, let's be honest. And this is on, off, and at some point it just goes. And there you are, driving along, no power steering, and waiting for a quick exit. Nobody wants to be in that situation. It's the last time you're ever going to use the fridge in DC mode after that, I can assure you. So that's one well-known problem. The solution, obviously, is not just to change the board over. If you change the board over, you're not going to solve the problem, right? If you fix the problem with the earth, you're probably not going to fix the problem completely, because it's an ongoing war with corrosion, right? So the only way to fix the problem is to remove the board. To remove the freeway problem altogether. You can unplug the freeway socket solution. That would be one good idea. Another good idea is just to replace the board completely. The reason why I'd say change the board, because you've got a separate problem with these guys. It is also connected to the DC line, but you've got all three power supplies going into this. You've got the DC, you've got the AC, and what's happening here, right, is that the corrosion, right, is eating away at all of the connectors and eating away at the PCB. And if you have any problem with like a silicon chip or transistor blowing inside this and going short circuit, you're going to get problems like this. And when you get these problems, you're going to possibly get a fire. especially in combination with other factors like the fact that they respray the cooling tubes, they rust, and so people clean them up and they respray them, but the paint that they use isn't always to protect against fire, right? So if you have one of these go and you've had other additions as well, maybe it's a bad combination. So these are the problems. That's why I say generally it's a good idea. Just basically, you can see what's happened here. It's actually burnt out at the back of the board. So that's a serious indicator that it wasn't just on the front of the board. This problem on the PCB, you can see that it's burning the back out of the PCB. This is not a good system really all around. So I would recommend changing it out from a 3-way to a 2-way is a much more sensible idea, because that way it solves the problem. If you've got then the problem with the battery and the corrosion and the earth corrosion, you're never going to get into that problem where you're driving along. Let me say something quickly. This was also a bad idea. Not most people, many people talk about driving with their fridges on gas, and that's something which a lot of people talk about, and it seems to be not causing any problems. Obviously don't go into a petrol station, and I wouldn't recommend it, anything like that, but that's what seems to be a lot of stories that you hear people doing. And the main thing to say, right, is that these fridges have got a lot of insulation inside them, so you don't need to be even having the fridge on all the time. You can actually turn the fridge off. You can drive for about 6 hours, and if that fridge is full, you'll probably find when you get to the destination, there's no problem with the food. It's all still cold because there's so much insulation inside the fridges. They're not like even normal domestic fridges where they haven't got any insulation. So that's another point where you don't even need the 3-way system. So definitely, yeah, think about changing it over to a universal board, and think about changing it to a system that doesn't have all these problems that can cause you fires and death traps. And with that, I'll leave it to you.